Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic. I'm the founder of the Summit Leadership Alliance and host of these TechTonic Conversations, a series of live webcasts I've had the pleasure of hosting for the last 4+ years, bringing to you interesting, valuable, timely, actionable information and insights from both Canadian technology leaders and tech executives, but also subject matter experts and other leaders who have meaningful, important things to say about the evolution of enterprise technology. This is a live session. Today is Monday, March 31st, noon Eastern. So this will give you an opportunity to engage with our guests. So as audience members, if you would like to submit a question, have a comment on what we are going to be discussing today, please feel free to use the Q&A function of this Zoom platform, and we will do our best to address any questions that might come. Also, as a reminder, the session is being recorded, and I will soon after this goes live, after we finish the live conversation, I will be posting it on our Tectonics YouTube channel. So you'll be welcome to check it and share it with your friends. With that, no further ado, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome my colleague and friend, Duncan Stewart. Duncan is the Director of TMT Research for Deloitte Canada. And when we say TMT, what we mean is Technology, Media, and Telecom. And Duncan champions publication of a very, very important, very useful, very usable publication. Duncan, first of all, thank you very much for your time. I love having you join us.
Thank you for having me on. I may not have a Canadian flag behind me, but I do have. I think we're representing here. So
awesome. Wonderful. Duncan, thank you very much for your time. I typically do not introduce my audience, my guests to my audience. Instead, I ask them to tell us a little bit about who they are in their own words. So let's maybe start by giving you a chance to just simply tell us a little bit more who you are and what you're working on.
Well, I am a proud Canadian. I have been in Canada working in TMT since 1990. I started off actually as a technology analyst working for brokerage firms, telecom, writing about that. Then I was a fund manager for about 15 years before joining Deloitte in 2007. Since then, in addition to being director of TMT leader for Canada for research, I've sort of specialized a bit. In the last few years, I've become the managing director for semiconductor research and telecommunications research for Deloitte globally. And that's really interesting because when we're talking about AI and generative AI, there's a lot of conversations around data centers and chips and fiber optic, and we're going to be exploring a lot of that today. But I did want to flag for everybody on the call that, first of all, I'm Canadian, yay. But secondly, I'm really much more global than I'm Canadian. So I really want to be able to offer everybody on this call a chance both for a global perspective and then sometimes the Canadian angle. What's the twist on this for people here in and Dalibor? I even offer a special Alberta angle for some of these. I think we can narrow it down by postal code if you ask me to.
Awesome. Oh, and I will, absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation today.
So the thing we had talked about is I'm going to share my screen just for a minute so that we can kind of frame the conversation. So here I go. Duncan hits share. Duncan hits share here. And then I go full screen here.
There we go.
And you're going to give me a thumbs up when you can see that full screen.
Well, yes? I can see. There we go. Thumbs up.
There we go. Yep. There's always a bit of a lag. I never know how much of a lag. So there is this thing called Deloitte TMT Predictions. You can find it on the web. There is a full report. You can download it. It's a lot of work. This is actually our 24th edition of predictions. And 24th. I do want to say, sorry?
24th edition.
24th. We started in 2000 and we missed 1 year, but aside from that, it's 24 years. Wow. I do want to flag that although I lead the team writing it, I actually have a large global diverse team from around the world. These are my colleagues. I am proud to be able to work with them. They are awesome, awesome folks. And I do want to flag that. We have 20 topics this year.
20.
Kind of the giant topics, the ones, 5,000 words each. There's a bunch on generative AI. I think the ones in yellow are probably the most interesting. I do want to touch on the use of AI in media. I think that's a fascinating talk. I had a meeting this morning about this, so I think that's a really interesting one. On the next page, there's a bunch of cool stuff here. Dalibor, I'll be really blunt with you. Right now, if I was talking to a semiconductor audience, we would be talking about chiplets and photonics and all that we don't need to do that. But hey, if somebody in the Q&A wants to drill down, let's remind them that just because it's not in yellow doesn't mean we don't talk about it. But I do want to focus around GenAI and cyber. Huge hot button issue. GenAI at the enterprise edge. On-prem computing is coming. You and I are old enough to remember when we actually did on-prem. It's coming back, baby. And then I do want to talk about quantum. There's something going on there that's sort of interesting, fast-moving, hot topic. So I'm going to go back to this slide, and I'm just going to say Duncan is going to stop sharing his screen in a second because I think it's better if it's...
Yeah, out of all of these items or these bullets that people will find inside the actual publication, what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss the ones that are highlighted, kind of, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. Makes sense.
So,
yes.
On that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think the viewership needs as much pictures of old people with no hair and gray beards as possible. Let's make those images as big as we possibly can.
Let's do it, baby. There we go. Excellent.
I think I have a little more hair than you. Yeah. Anyway, no, it's a separate issue. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about generative AI and data centers.
Yeah.
Let me give you a little context here, because this is breaking news, absolutely breaking news. January, December of last year, the expectation was around the world, the big hyperscalers would be spending somewhere around $280 to $300 billion on data centers over the next 10 years. Oops, that's a typo. That's how much they're expected to spend in the next 12 months. So this is a remarkable amount of money. As remarkable as it was, in the last few weeks, they have all updated their spending and they've taken their numbers up. We are now looking at about 350 to 370. And then at a recent technology conference in San Jose, one of the world's largest chip companies that specializes in making chips for these data centers said that, this is a $350-ish billion market in 2025, but they think it's going to $1 trillion a year by 2030. That's a lot of
a year.
Trillion.
This is capital investments.
Correct.
In standing up data centers.
And most of that's chips, but some of it's cooling and power and buildings and concrete and roofs and water and everything else. But the way you think about data centers is their megawatts. They don't talk about how many square feet it is. They don't talk about how high it is or how wide it is. They talk about how many megawatts is it. The rough rule of thumb is that a smallish data center uses 10 megawatts, a decent sized one, 50 to 100, and then some of these hyperscalers are building 250 to 500 megawatt data centers. Now, before I go, forgive me, my extremely beautiful wife may wander behind me 4 or 5 times during this.
All right. As long as she should wave to us.
She could wave. Maybe next time it's better to wave. So I'm actually going to show you a picture. I'm going to pick up my computer. So do you see Duncan's fridge here?
Yepper.
Duncan's fridge, see the top?
Yep.
The weird thing is the fridge in my kitchen is almost exactly the size of a rack in a data center. Now, historically, data centers were filled with these racks, and they might consume, 3, maybe 5 kilowatts of power per refrigerator-sized rack. The latest version, the 2025 version of these fridge-sized racks burn 125 kilowatts. And in a data center, you would have tens, hundreds, even thousands of these racks. And Dalibor, next year they're going to be 250, and the year after that they're 500 kilowatts per rack. These racks are literally consuming 100 times as much power per square meter as they used to. That means we need new chips, we need new cooling, liquid cooling, we need water, we need energy, we need renewable energy where we can get it, we need low carbon energy where we can get that, we need energy storage, and you want the takeaway? There ain't enough wind, there ain't enough solar.
Yeah.
Deloitte predicts that data center use of energy will rise from 1.3% last year of global electricity demand to 3.5. Maybe we're even conservative. It could be higher. 3.7. Energy use is poised to rise rapidly. This is stressing electrical grids, generation, transmission, distribution. Yes, we would like low carbon, but where we can't get low carbon. So, Dalibor, I grew up in BC, just next province over from you. BC has a lot of hydropower. Hydro's pretty good, nice and reliable, low carbon, but it doesn't end there. There's not enough hydro. It's hard to make more hydro. But people are thinking about locating data centers where there's hydro, where there's nuclear, if you can get that, where there's cold air, open the windows in winter and cool down your data center. So there's lots of interesting angles for Canadians.
We live in a perfect country for this industry, right?
So I see there's a call from, a question from Hanson Downer in the Q&A, and I think it's the right time. Is it okay if I answer his question?
By all means, 100%. Please do.
Okay, so Hanson has asked the question, how do they cool these data center racks in today's data centers?
Yeah.
Do you mean today, yesterday, or the day after tomorrow? Yesterday, by and large, it was fans. You would move air over the racks. There were some advanced fan technologies that are still being used a little bit today, but everybody agrees you need to move to what's called direct liquid cooling. So I will actually have liquid flowing through and touching the heat sinks on these chips, pulling the power, the heat out of data centers. That is an enormous growth industry. Now, Duncan does not offer stock advice, even though I used to be a fund manager. I will say the companies that make liquid cooling solutions, by and large, all of these companies have seen their share prices go up in anticipation of massive data center use of liquid cooling. So great question. How do you cool them? Air in the past, liquid in the future. That's going to be the new normal inside these AI data centers. We have another question here from Robert Brabbers about tariff disruptions impacting technology. So part of the problem is it's really unclear. So there are proposed tariffs, and it's not just tariffs, there's export restrictions. And most people think, oh, this is about the U.S. There's tariffs coming from the U.S., maybe. There's tariffs coming from China. There's tariffs coming on this country, but not that country. Then there's tariffs on end markets. So if I put a tariff on steel and aluminum, that has an impact on data centers which use steel and aluminum. If I have a tariff on certain kinds of chips or restrictions on certain chips, all of this means supply chain complexity, which was already through the roof, is going to be even more complex than we thought it was before. So I have a number of chip company clients, but I also have a number of people who are thinking about building their own data centers, and they are going, it's a period of tremendous uncertainty. At a high level, theoretically, tariffs could, one, cause prices to rise. Two, they can have implications for where do I locate certain manufacturing operations or data centers. But one of the other really big implications is around sovereignty. What we are seeing in a world of tariffs and export restrictions and so forth, we're seeing a fragmentation of the previous globalization. Correct. There will be a U.S. block, maybe in America's block, maybe not. That kind of depends on what happens. Does Canada need to have its own AI capacity? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. But I was just in Europe, and they absolutely are going, we don't want to rely on data centers in China. Fair enough, reasonable. We don't want to rely on data centers in the US, which might cut us off. Fair enough, reasonable. We need to build our own European data centers. There's this whole thing. So, Dalibor, if I was going to recommend for anybody on the call a bonus phrase to type into your search engine, type in the word Eurostack. EUROSTACK. This is a thing that the Europeans have been talking about for, decades now. But they never really meant it. The Eurostack is the idea that Europe needs to have its own chip-making capacity. Makes sense. Their own data centers. Wow, that would be new. They need to have a Euro hyperscaler to compete against the North American and Chinese ones. They need to have their own software. It's basically that idea, Dalibor. I think you and I, both tech guys, going back a lot. We're used to the idea of there's a tech stack, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3.
Yeah.
Europe is going, do we need to create our own stack of technologies across hardware and software? And then when you layer that on with defense, do we need to have our own fighter airplanes, not rely on somebody else? This is, Dalibor, I'm not giving you enough time to ask the question. So I'll protect Dalibor. I'll be Dalibor now. Hey, Duncan. What are you seeing in the last few weeks that's really interesting?
Absolutely.
It's this whole idea of the Eurostack. This is new. Literally, Dalibor, I was in Portugal on February 3rd, and nobody was talking about by the Eurostack. By the time I was in Sweden on March 3rd, nobody would shut up about it. Does that give you the sense of how it's pivoted?
Its sense of urgency is what it is, right? So let's talk about Canada in this context a little bit, because geographically we are in a perfect climate location to be the destination for these data centers. What could stop us? What do you think would stop Canada from taking fullest advantage of this vast opportunity? Or do you know what's happening across Canada on this, if anything?
Yeah, so there's lots going on. A Canadian telco last week, I can't remember, right? Dalibor, literally, I can't keep track day to day, let alone week to week. This is so rapidly fluctuating. A Canadian telco announced that they were they were using an existing center in the province of Quebec and experimenting with doing GenAI, generative AI, the 125,000 watt refrigerator I talked about, that they are going to be doing some GenAI in Quebec, northern Quebec, and taking advantage of hydro, nuclear, and cold air. So that's an opportunity. So that would be a good thing. How else could Canada benefit? I'll be blunt. There's no way you are not going to be able to power these data centers purely with wind and solar and hydro in the short term. In the long term, nuclear is going to matter even more, especially an emerging kind of technology called SMR, small modular reactors. Yes. Instead of gigawatt nuclear plants like we're used to, smaller, 50, 100 megawatt nuclear reactors, maybe even 10 or 25s, sized exactly for the data center. Canada has a lot of uranium. Now I'm doing my province by province localization. This is not BC, this is not Alberta, but our friends in Saskatchewan happen to have some of the world's largest uranium deposits. Right. That would be a way that Canada could benefit. The other thing is Canada actually has a 50-year history of innovations in nuclear reactors. So that would be another thing that we could see Canada benefit from. The other one that I would mention, you said what could slow it down? Fairly obviously, if American companies wanted to locate data centers in Canada, that would be a good thing for Canada. But if there's trade frictions and that doesn't happen, that would be, in a way, a headwind, but it would be a tailwind in another way, because then Canadians would probably need to build their own data centers.
Yeah. So in other words, like an optimistic view here is we have the land, we have the energy, we have the space, we have the climate, we have educated people. So we are a prime location for this. The question is, are we going to be building Canadian data centers in Canada? Are we going to be building Canadian and American data centers in Canada? Or are we going to be building Canadian, American, and international data centers in Canada?
So one
But we should be
complexity
building something, for goodness sake, right?
I think there's a good chance we build something. But the one complexity I want to introduce right now is latency. If I am training a generative AI model, it takes me like 3 weeks to run a training model, a really, really, really giant big one. If 2 weeks and 6 days into that process, something breaks, you lose the whole model and you have to start all over again.
Mm-hmm.
Training, not inference. Inference is a little different. Training these models is very sensitive to interruption. So distributing it. So when I do my training, I'm not going to do some of my training in Canada, some in France, and some in Singapore. That doesn't work. You can't do it around the world. You kind of have to cluster them all together. That's why so many of these data centers are found in specific areas, whether that's in Malaysia or Virginia. We are seeing, at least for now, tremendous concentration of these data centers.
And that will be that there is an opportunity for all of our provinces, but I know I live in Alberta. I know Alberta is jumping on the opportunity to attract both national and international players, and as far as I'm concerned, fingers crossed. I think it'll be to me, this is the right infrastructure investment for the future of our country. This is the right investment, assuming that we need to be making investment in infrastructure to continue to rocket fuel our civilization going forward. This is the type of investment I think would be good for all of us.
Now, I have to be a realist. My job at Deloitte is to talk to my clients, and they go, okay, Duncan, tell me why this isn't a bubble. And I talk about that for 5 minutes. And then they go, okay, great, that was good. Now spend 5 minutes talking about why it is. It's really important to have both conversations.
Yeah.
Why is it not a bubble? There's a thing that I'll be talking about in a minute called Agentic AI, which uses a lot more AI compute, but makes AI maybe 100, maybe 1,000 times more useful. There's a thing called chain of reasoning, which are reasoning models, which once again make AI more useful, but need a lot more of these data centers. Finally, there's something called reality or world-based AI. That's the idea that if I was going to make robots that know what they're doing, because right now, robots are stupid. They're dumb. Dumb as a sack of hammers. If I could make truly intelligent robots, I need to train them on actual video and physics and the real world. Yep. Man, that's going to need 1,000 or 1,000,000 times more compute. That's kind of the bull case. That's why maybe we need all these data centers. On the other hand, and Dalibor, you and I worked at Deloitte together for, 15 years?
Almost 20 years. Yeah.
At Deloitte, when Duncan's on a webcast, on a podcast, what happens if Duncan mentions a client name on somebody from Deloitte, jumps in through the door and breaks both my legs? And I don't want that to happen, okay? So there's a rule at Deloitte that I can't name names, and I'm not about to start now. So, talking at a high level, over the weekend, an unnamed Chinese cloud company announced that they were using a more efficient AI model such that they didn't think they needed as many data centers as they had said last week. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to understand there's these huge drivers, massive drivers of why we need more and more and more data centers. But at the same time, people are out there building software models, algorithms that are so much more efficient, maybe you don't need as much of these data centers. And at the same time, the chip makers are making increasingly efficient chips. So both at the hardware level and the software level, we're getting more efficient with AI. So this is the tension. There are people who think we need all these data centers. There are other people who say maybe we don't. I don't think it's clear at this time who's going to win, but what I'm hearing a lot of people think about, and I'm going to close off the data center conversation here, what I'm hearing a lot of people think about is, I think we have to build the data centers just in case, because if it turns out we need them and I haven't built them and it takes 3 years to build one, it's an existential threat. The risk of not building the data centers is much, much higher than the risk of building them and being wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And I completely understand the tension, and I completely understand his point of view. It makes sense. There is probably critical mass. There's probably the level of investment into data center that is truly no regret. This comes hell and high water, this capability is going to be needed. We know that. The question is, do we need 100% of what we estimate now? Do we need 50%? But the 50% we will need for sure, kind of. Very good.
I'm going to push on your numbers there.
Well, my numbers...
Because this is how I think about it. I believe if we are planning on spending, okay, if it's 300 this year and $1 trillion in 2030, add that up and assume some growth rates. 1, 3, 3, 3.
Let's say 100 million every year, right? Or
200 no. It's 300. It's 350 billion. 350 billion a year this year, going up every year. So let's say it'll be about 2.5 trillion in aggregate. Okay.
Yeah.
In nominal dollars, 2.5 trillion over that period, and with inflation and interest rates ignored, call it 2.5.
Yeah.
I believe of that 2.5, the amount that we absolutely 100% need is 250 billion. I think that the next 2.25 is the option.
Yeah.
I actually think it's an order of magnitude. Yeah. We are overbuilding by 10x just in case.
Yeah. I see what you mean. And that
I could be wrong.
No. I see what you mean. Yes. I
so
see.
My friend Sebastian Choquette has asked a question saying, first time he's heard about Eurostack, can American hyperscalers effectively address Eurostack's requirements for data residency, operational sovereignty, and technological independence, or will these demands ultimately necessitate the growth of European alternatives? Yes. Thank you, Sebastian. I love you. Please dial into all my podcasts going forward. That is la question juste, the exact right question to ask. The view 6 weeks ago in Europe is we do not need to have our own European. So the view used to be, if I'm European, I need the hyperscalers, the American hyperscalers, to build hyperscale data centers physically in Europe, but they can be owned and operated and run by Americans, and I'm okay with that. The new Eurostack thinking is, nope, not going to work if, based on some of the things we're seeing around tariffs and retaliation and export restrictions and geopolitics, not just from the US, but from China and everywhere else, not only do we not want a Singapore data center or a Chinese data center or an American, Europe, the Eurostack logic is we must have data centers here owned, operated, and run only by Europeans, not by somebody else. That is the logic. I am not saying that is guaranteed to happen, and I'm not saying that won't change, but that's what I was hearing in the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's an interesting, not surprising given where you're at, but it's a huge question, because I think that if we are honest, European countries are lagging way behind in terms of innovation and technology. Like, there are no hyperscalers that are European owned at all.
Correct.
There are no chip makers, pretty much, except, well, Holland, yes, right? But at this scale, at this level, the ones that compete, a little bit.
There's
right?
some in France. There's some, anyway, it's small.
But it's, so the jury is out. It's not necessarily a given successful strategy. Hope.
The other thing I will flag is, if Europe needs to be self-sufficient in AI for making cars and doing research and running their telecommunications networks, do you know where else they also need to be really good at AI? Defense. If Europe and Germany specifically looking at Germany because they have recently changed their minds about defense spending. If Europe doubles or triples their spending on defense, which it looks like that's what they're going to do, if Europe views that that's a strategic priority for them, building their own European AI stack, which includes chips, hardware, software, algorithms, if AI matters for fighting the wars of the 2030s, and it will, most people believe, then not only are they building a Euro stack to compete with the US and China economically, they need to do it from a military and defense perspective as well.
Yeah. So these are like incredible conversations and incredible times that we live in, right? It's incredible to have this conversation. 6 months ago, it would have been almost unbelievable scenario that would lead us into this conversation, right? But we are where we are. This is really interesting.
I like what Sebastian said. I work for one of those American hyperscalers, hence my question.
There we go.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Very excellent. Yes.
Do I believe that the American hyperscalers, in some markets, the concerns around sovereignty will be lower globally? Absolutely. Yeah. We see the same thing. Many people around the world still rely on Chinese. I probably shouldn't say which country. I think I can say it. I was in Turkey, and their view of, what gear is in my telecom network, whose cloud do I use, the attitudes that we have in Canada and Western Europe are very different in other parts of the world. For them, using a Chinese or an American or a whoever hyperscaler, it's like, we don't see any difference. So we have to remember that Europe's attitudes are not necessarily going to be the same for everybody in the world.
That's actually very true. That's very true. Thank you for this. This was really, really very good, insightful, right on. Thank you very much for that. Should we touch on the next one? Yes.
Can I tell you, Dalibor, can I tell you my favorite story? I was giving a presentation in Istanbul, in Turkey, and it was supposed to be 90 minutes long, and I had like 61 slides that I was going to show. I put the first slide up, which was on GenAI and data centers and all the stuff we've just spent 32 minutes talking about. I spent 84 minutes on slide number 1, and I never got, it's fine. This is what the conversation is about. Yeah. While we are talking about AI, the next topic I want to talk about is phones.
Yeah.
My phone has a little chip. It doesn't. A portion of the processor inside my phone has something called an NPU. That stands for a neural processing unit. This is a small part of the chip worth maybe $1 or $2 that is dedicated to doing generative AI tasks on my device.
Yeah, the edge.
Why would I want that? Privacy, security, resilience. I can do GenAI stuff even when there's no network connection. What's our prediction? 30%, maybe 35% of all phones this year sold will have GenAI on their device. Point 1. Point 2, half of all computers sold this year will have GenAI chips on our computers. Longer term, all of our robots are going to have GenAI chips. All of our TV sets are going to have GenAI chips. All of our health wearables are going to have GenAI chips. I believe, not I, who cares? Duncan, who cares what Duncan thinks? Duncan's not that smart. The smart people Duncan talks to tell me that we are going to have a hybrid world. A lot of GenAI is going to be done in the cloud, even in the future. A lot of GenAI is going to be done locally on our phones, computers, robots, and TV sets. It's going to be a mix. Some stuff will be done at the edge, and some stuff will be done at the core in the cloud. You need to really think about it occurring in both places. It's not either or, it's both.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good.
Now, I have to push back a little. And I'm going to keep talking about Turkey because it's the perfect example. I was in Istanbul and I was in a room and I said, so who here has a phone? They all put up their hands. I said, who here has a 5G phone? They all put up their hands. I said, you do know there are no 5G networks in Turkey. They don't even launch till 2026. They said, we know. And I said, so why did you buy a 5G phone? And they said, because it's what's on sale in the store. My point is, we may all have Gen AI phones. We may all have Gen AI PCs. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to use the functionality of these Gen AI devices on day one. I think there's going to be a little bit of a lag where we're going to have this capacity on our edge devices, but it might not be fully utilized in year one. Instead, the killer apps will emerge over time. But I will say, and Dalibor, I don't know, I haven't asked you this question. Do you use any of those Gen AI tools on a regular basis?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
How many times a day?
Let's say a dozen times a day.
A dozen times a day. Do they work when you're on an airplane flying over Chicago with lousy Wi-Fi?
No.
Not even slightly. I particularly hate flying over Chicago. The Wi-Fi never works. But in my experience, people who are planning on using generative AI, the fact that you could now do it on your computer or on your phone without a network connection, that's a pretty big, to me, that's not everybody, but that feels like a pretty compelling use case right out of the gate.
Yeah. This is incredible. Thank you for sharing that. So we are looking into the future holds a combination of Gen AI compute occurring in the cloud like we know now, but also on the edge. And it feels like technology, like hardware now, maybe even slightly ahead of the actual software to take advantage of that. And it may be the next year or so we will actually feel when this lights up. Because when it lights up,
you and I are old enough to know. I'm not sure I'm going to agree with. The hardware. I agree. The hardware is really advanced. I'm not sure if the software isn't advanced enough yet, or if the users aren't advanced. I think some of this is consumer and enterprise users need to change the way we think. So some of it's hardware, some of it's software, and some of it's the user experience.
Yeah. And perfect. Very good. So neural processing units, NPUs, are the new chips, the new technology that is finding itself inside all of our devices, not just phones and computers, but ultimately watches, glasses, fridges, televisions.
Absolutely. And robots. Don't forget the robots. Now, Duncan is a little bit of a semiconductor guy, so I need to be pedantic, just so everybody understands. See my phone? My phone has a chip in it. That chip is called a CPU. It doesn't have a separate chip called an NPU. Instead, a portion of the CPU is now dedicated to doing the NPU functionality. Okay? Just so nobody yells at me for being inaccurate.
There we go. Excellent.
So the next topic the next topic I want to talk about is agentic AI. Now, we had a little what the heck is agentic? I am using a Gen AI tool. I ask it a question, summarize this. What is this? What is the best way of doing that? And it gives me an answer.
Yes.
But what if I have like a 10-step process? I ask it question 1, it answers question 1. Then I ask it question 2, it answers that, but it's not linked to the answer for question 1, and it doesn't anticipate question 3. And at the end of all of it, it still can't do anything. Agentic AI is a new form of generative AI where it does multi-step, multi-modal, multimodal text and video and numbers and calculations, and even is able to click on a computer screen and buy something or send an invoice or close a file. Agentic AI is the latest, greatest, hottest, newest thing. And the reason I'm talking about this with my friend Dalibor is Duncan wrote a prediction about agentic AI saying really cool, really important, absolutely game-changing, probably in the back half of 2025. Then Duncan gets on an airplane and Duncan flies in front of a client and the clients say, Duncan, your prediction is wrong. I'm shocked. Wrong? How can it be wrong? It's only February. because it's not the back half of 2025. We are using agentic AI now at scale to write software code. Last year, we used GenAI and it made our software coders 6 to 7% more effective. This year, we're using it. It makes them 60 to 70% more effective. In our call center, 50 to 80% of our inbound customer calls are being answered by the agents without human intervention. Does this have an impact on employment, I ask? In software, no. And you and I have talked about this. Tech Trends, which you worked with for years. Last year, I believe you had a chapter around technical debt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tech debt is the fact that every bank, every phone company, every government department has 47 different software systems that don't talk to each other, are badly documented, haven't been updated in a decade, and it's all a mishmush and hard to maintain and unreliable and could be improved. What is going on is that companies I talk to around the world who are using agentic AI to write code say, we're not laying anybody off. Instead, we are going to use these new efficient coders and we are going to start reducing our trillions of dollars in aggregate technical debt. That's part one. Part two, in the call centers. The hiring freeze was January. The layoffs start in April. I believe you need to have a very nuanced view around generative AI and labor and employment and augment versus automate. There are jobs, software, where Gen AI is an amazing tool and nobody gets fired or laid off. Yeah. There are other applications. So I mentioned call centers. I'm worried about that space. Another one I'll mention, legal. Yeah. So Dalibor, I'm not sure if you and I have talked about this, but like if you're a phone company, every time a small business does a new deal with you, you have to write a contract just for them. You have a team of 20 or 30 lawyers doing that, and using agentic AI, you need 2 or 3 lawyers. You don't need 20 or 30. Yeah. I am contract management, all of the permitting, RFPs, a lot of these kind of very repetitive things. I think we're going to see significant levels of automation. Now, there are new jobs that will get created, of course, but I do think we need to understand that talent is going to be a shifting thing happening as a result of agentic AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I think that as we see the agentic AI take shape, that helps us clarify which jobs actually are going to be impacted. Thus far, it was generic, like AI is gonna coming after some work, but now I think what is emerging is clarity of exactly what that actually is going to be. And
with the caveat that it'll probably be different again next year.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes. Again, we live in a fascinating time. Probably the most interesting time in the history of Homo sapiens.
Or are we just being narcissistic? Everybody thinks I don't know, living through the Napoleonic Wars was kind of cool too. Okay, the next topic.
Let's talk about the next one. Deepfakes, if I recall.
Correct. So I want to spend a little bit of time, because when we talked about this, when we wrote this prediction, we thought that deepfakes were going to be a real problem around elections. People were going to say that this politician did say that or didn't say that. And that turns out not to actually be a really big problem. I was surprised by that. I thought it was going to be a really big political thing. Not actually where it's bad. Where it's bad is it says right there, we are on a video call from an unnamed, I think I can say this one, it's Zoom. I'm on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
If I'm on a Zoom call inside my company and my CFO comes on and tells us, hey, you guys should do this, most of the time, I'm probably what my CFO tells me.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
What if that's not my CFO?
Yeah.
What if generative AI has gotten so good that it can create realistic video, audio, lips moving, right accent, say the right words of my executives. We have data on this. This is called deepfake phishing, phishing.
Yeah.
Deepfake phishing executive impersonations are up 850%. So, Dalibor, back to the question you said you were always going to ask me. How has this changed?
The last few weeks.
And Barbara never did wave. She's not good that way. But what's changed is that I was talking with banks, telcos, electrical utilities. Duncan, they say, your prediction on deepfakes, this is, take yourself seriously, my friend. This is a real thing. So I have the world's cutest dog. You can see the dog outside. There's Grace.
Oh,
so I have to let the dog in. Hang on a second.
Yeah, of course.
There we go. Dog is in the house. Duncan is back. There we go. So this deep fake cyber thing, let me explain why it's so bad. There are a bunch of companies that make tools for making video and audio, and their rules are you cannot impersonate CFOs, and there's all kinds of metadata and labeling, and that's great. Then there's all kinds of bad people who make tools that don't have any of that. So the bad people tools are being used by other bad people. And although there are tools that can detect deepfakes, first, they're not that accurate. And second, they're kind of slow. So it takes like 5 days to figure out that thing just happened. The other one, and we were going to talk about other changes. So there was a bad earthquake in Myanmar, which had implications in Bangkok. Every time there's a natural disaster or a plane crash or something like that, there are a bunch of real images of buildings falling down, and then there's a bunch of fake images, and media companies are under tremendous pressure. If I am here in Canada, one of the major networks, people watch those networks believing, no offense, if you see something on social media, maybe you believe it, maybe you don't. But if I see it on the nighttime news, I expect that video to be verified. And that's a real challenge for media companies doing that in real time. Hot topic, talking with my media companies. While we're on media, I'm now going to shift gears to my last topic on this page, which is the idea of how will media companies be using AI? Because the classic story, the news story is Tom Cruise and Tom Cruise's horse is out of a job. They're just going to create AI to make a digital Tom Cruise with a digital Tom Cruise voice sitting on a digital horse. That's not happening. There are all kinds of challenges around IP, intellectual property, about violating IP. There are rules with unions and laws. There are concerns about the ability to protect your IP in Europe and other countries. So in general, by and large, media companies are not replacing Tom Cruise and his horse. They're not even replacing the people behind Tom Cruise and his horse. Maybe some of the mountains and stuff in the background. But where this gets fascinating is they're using it in the back office. Dubbing, subtitling, marketing, advertising, permitting, contracting, all of this stuff. So where GenAI maybe will be 3% of what we see on the screens, it might be 30% of the behind-the-scenes stuff that you see. And over, media companies are saying, Duncan, Deloitte has really nailed it. That is exactly where our spending and our investment is going. Don't worry about all of your favorite actors and actresses and musicians being replaced. That's not really a thing. And I mean, I'm going to name names here. Taylor Swift, did she come to Edmonton?
Yeah. I think,
good stuff.
Not recently, but yes.
Okay, no, but I meant as part of the recent tour. So she was just in Toronto. Huge thing. Everywhere I go, people still want to see Taylor Swift sing her songs. And it's like, what is it, $1 billion concert tour. Yes, there is still tremendous interest in non-AI live content. That's not changing. But the marketing and so forth behind this, that's the real impact.
This is fascinating, and it's actually counterintuitive, but as you explain it, it becomes actually crystal clear. Because quite frankly, the rest of the enterprises, the rest of the industries that are not studios making movies, that's how they are leveraging
Right.
Gen AI and agentic. So really, they are studios are adopting the way that everybody else is using it. And now, here is a thought, and I don't know if this would be part of the prediction or not. Maybe next year. Now that you actually mentioned this, so I'm thinking, where will the use case actually be? Perhaps a use case is for those, maybe actors of the past who are not no longer with us, creating new movies with them, right? Or maybe creating movies that are out of the IP. Like maybe there is a license expiration and now you can recreate a movie. That could be an interesting thing, eh?
That is stuff that we actually talk about in the prediction itself, and there's a lot of legal gray areas there. It
Yeah.
depends which country you're in. In the United States, copyright lasts much longer than in some other jurisdictions. Other jurisdictions don't care that much about piracy and copyright in general.
Yeah.
It gets complex very, very quickly. Very famously, over the weekend, a number of the AI tools, the image generators, actually allow you to create images and still images and video images in the famous artistic styles of large commercial. So I think Dalibor, what this tells us is, even if the studios aren't using it now, first of all, who knows what they'll do a year from now? But much more importantly, there's 7 billion people out there on social media. If these tools exist, we are going to see a lot of social media content created
Oh,
using
yes.
AI I don't mean the near term, I mean in the next 8 hours.
Yeah. In the immediate term, we should introduce
Exactly.
the long term, mid term, short term, and now the immediate term
Yes,
as a new
the next X
as a new
seconds.
term. Yeah. This was fantastic. This is fantastic. Thank you for sharing this. We have a few more of these trends that we wanted to sort of highlight for the audience. I think on your other slide, on the second slide, there were three
Yeah.
more, right?
We also, though, have a question from Cristina Balanescu, who, at a guess, is probably Romanian, and I have actually forgotten. I used to mulțumesc for your question. Oh my God, I remembered my Romanian. That's from 5 years ago. So Christina asked a question: what advice would you give to a 20-year-old student currently pursuing a technical university degree who is uncertain about which directions to go? First of all, invent a time machine, go back 10 years and get a job designing AI chips and cash in all your stock options. There's your answer. That's how you make a lot of money. Going forward, there's a fascinating question here, Christina. Thank you so much for asking this, because I get this question all the time. So the head of one of Deloitte's member firms a while ago, in the last 12 months, asked me, my son is doing exactly what you're doing, Christina. And he is studying computer programming. And he said, is that the right thing to do? With all of this Gen AI and Agentic AI, and I'm not going to name the person, but the CEO of one of the most famous Gen AI chip companies was asked this exact question, and he said, whatever you do, don't let your kid go into computer programming. There won't be any computer programming jobs 5 years from now. AI will do 100% of that. Wow. Does Duncan say that? Duncan does not say that. I'm not smart enough to say that. But some awfully smart people are deeply, deeply worried that literally Agentic takes over a really big chunk of the software. Now, I think if I'm going to modify that a little, I think the 50-year-olds and the 40-year-olds of today keep their jobs as the architect, as the person who gives the design to the Agentic, and the Agentic then builds it. But I'm worried about, Christina, that the 24-year-old you will be in 4 years who actually sits in front of a keyboard going like this, that might not be a thing anymore. So that's my first thing that I'm hearing. The next thing that I'm hearing is do I need to educate myself about generative AI? Do I need to change my own brain? Do I need to become an early adopter, a fast mover? Do I need to be at the bleeding? As a young person, do I need to get expert on how Gen AI works? And Dalibor, I don't know the answer to this. I know lots of smart people who think that getting really savvy about Gen AI is absolutely a thing that you should do because you are positioning yourself for the future. But I'm old enough to know there's a joke in technology. We only call it AI as long as it doesn't work. Once it starts working, we just call it software. If AI, if agentic AI, if generative AI is as good and as powerful as everybody expects it to become, it vanishes. I won't even know I'm using it. I will just go to my computer and I'll say, book my trip to Venice, and it'll figure everything out. I don't need to understand Gen AI because Gen AI understands me.
Yeah, but you
And
don't need to, you don't need to understand the Gen AI. You need to just understand the promise and potential and how to leverage it, in other words, right?
And I know, Dalibor, I know smart people who think option one, and I know smart people who think option two, and I don't know which one's going to be right. I see we now, and by the way, there's a whole other slide I might not even get to, in which case we don't get to it, we don't get to it. We're having a fun conversation.
We'll come back in a few months to cover whatever next time, right?
Okay, so Sebastian is asking, yes. So yes, 2024 bespoke agents, but the real breakthrough should come in the latter half of 25 with true democratization of orchestrator agents, agents managing other agents. That is one view. There is actually, Sebastian, another thing going on, which is the idea that a truly powerful agentic AI may in fact replace the entire SaaS enterprise stack. I will no longer have write once and customize enterprise tools. Rather, each enterprise will use agentic tools to build their own enterprise stack, and that may be happening faster. So we may not see orchestrator agents. We may in fact rewrite enterprise vertical software to do those tasks. We'll see. Once again, Sebastian, this call, Dalibor, this is perfect. The questions I'm getting on this call are exactly the questions that CEOs of $50 billion companies are asking me every single day. So these are the exact right questions to be asking.
So
The
Duncan,
last thing, 3 minutes to go. What am I going to close with? I'm going to do a teaser. I'm going to do a teaser for my friend Dalibor and my friend Mike Bechtel tomorrow, where you will be talking about quantum, especially post-quantum cryptography. So
correct. Yeah.
there is the chance, no guarantee, there is a chance that at some point somebody will build what is called a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. This is a quantum computer that is large enough, stable enough, programmable enough that I can load it with 4,096 integer public key encryptions and using Shor's algorithm break all existing public key cryptography. Oh no, this won't happen now, but bad people are harvesting our data now and plan on decrypting it later. Our prediction is the emergence of post-quantum cryptography, PQC, and if only my buddy Dalibor had somebody from, I don't know, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, on your program tomorrow to talk about this. Tomorrow. This would be, so our prediction is that banks and others are quadrupling their investment in post-quantum cryptography because this is not a guarantee that somebody will invent such a computer, but if somebody does, once again, the risks are so high that I can't afford not to invest in this now. On that note, Dalibor, I'm going to throw it back to you. I'm going to thank everybody who asked the questions. I'm seeing we are coming to the top of the hour.
We are coming to the top of the hour, and it went like this. I was going to say, hey, Duncan, I wish we booked 2 hours for this. Clearly, we could have filled it with deep insights. So, Duncan, I would love to welcome you back. I'm sure all the audience would too. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and audience. Indeed, tomorrow, April 1st, we are going to be spending an hour doing a deep dive into Deloitte's Tech Trend 2025 on cryptography in the age of quantum with guests from both Deloitte and NIST to explore this. So please join us tomorrow, same channel, same time, same place, virtual place. With that, thank you very much, Duncan. Thank you very much, audience, and have yourselves a lovely Monday afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.